There were a series of plagues. I shouldn't say a series. There were two plagues in the first couple centuries A.D. in the Roman Empire. I want to say it was somewhere in the mid-hundred and somethings, like maybe 139 or something, and maybe another one or closer around 200 and something. Anyways, the first couple centuries there, and during the crisis, a lot of people were just kind of splitting and hitting dodge. You know what I mean, getting out of town. And the Christians actually ended up staying, in the midst of it to care for people because nobody was caring for them because they didn't want to get sick. And, as I read accounts like that, I'm blown away because the entire focus of the early church was on others, even to the point of it harming themselves. And if I'm realistic with myself, I don't want to be one of those people who says, the church today, whatever. If I'm honest with myself, I notice that the predominant focus as a Christian today is more on being happy. What I can do to be happy in life, to heal my hurts, to watch out for myself, to see what I mean? Those kinds of things. And I'm not necessarily saying that you ought to go lie in the street on a pad of nails, but there is definitely a change. Some of the most unhappy people I've ever met in my entire life are Christians. They don't have fun. They can't stand each other. They argue, fight, criticize, complain. They're just not happy to be alive. And, look at pop culture today. It shows heaven as a boring place, right, with harps. And it's like, oh, that's where people go after death, and where it's real boring. I want to go to hell where it's fun. You know what I mean? If you listen to a lot of metal music, they make a lot of references like that. Until more recently, metal bands like Polyphia and whatnot have shown heaven as kind of this drug-induced orgy. And, the typical idea of what we think of as heaven is shown in popular culture as very boring. But it's not just there. Religious people in general are shown to be fake, bitter complainers. Watch the show of The Simpsons, for instance. Homer actually has a neighbor. What? Yeah, Flanders. That's his name. He's shown to be the the stereotypical. You get what I'm saying. And that's kind of even the way that we've come to see ourselves too. And part of the problem is our idea of happiness. We believe life is about being happy. In the core of our being, that's just what we believe. We think life is about my happiness. God forbid that I, make a mistake or that, I come to a situation and I be, not absolutely happy all the time. And so most of our decisions we make are based on the idea of what will make me happy. So we make a series of poor decisions that we know are wrong, and if we just wouldn't make it out of a place of trying to be happy, but trying to do what's right. We believe truly in our heart that life is about being happy. We think in our heart God desires more than anything our happiness. And that's just not necessarily true. I remember a lot of stories about the early church being persecuted and dying and rejoicing all the while, realizing that they were making an impact on other people's lives. And I find myself not of the same persuasion. I find myself more focused on self-preservation. Look at, for instance, COVID. This is a great example. It doesn't matter how serious it was or not. That's completely irrelevant. Most of us, if we're honest, spent the time either being irritated with what was going on, afraid of what was going on, or just kind of hoped to forget all about it. How many of us genuinely, and I'm not trying to make you feel guilty, I just want you to think reflectively here. How many of us went to the hurting and tried to comfort those who were just completely overcome by fear? Well, if we're honest, most of us didn't. We were too focused griping and complaining about the politicians, about all these different things. Did we make a concerted effort to go to people, for instance, who believed in Joe Biden? Well, no, that's not the guy I voted for. See what I mean? It became all about our preferences instead of about reaching people. And we drew lines in the sand, really, is what we did. If you believe in masks, if you believe in Democrats, So, I mean, we had all these different things. And the funny thing about all this is that Satan the whole time was laughing. Because we were all fighting about stupid things instead of doing what that early church did, helping people. And once again, I'm not trying to make us all feel bad. I'm trying to show the just the focus. We spend an unnatural amount of time in life, an unnatural amount of energy trying to be happy. An amount of time and brain power that wasn't meant to be wasted on such efforts. And we are a very unsatisfied people, which is very funny because we focus now more on our happiness than humanity ever has. If you know anything about history, there were things, well, like the Enlightenment, for instance, that it kind of emphasized individuality over community. And whether you like it or not, you are a result of that. I mean, you don't have to like what happened, but we are all results of our culture. And so here we are hundreds of years later, and we are just a very unsatisfied people. And we focus on happiness. We try to make it all about us. The attention is always on us, and yet we're still unsatisfied. God's concern, is really not, his main concern is not really our temporary happiness. Rather, his concern is that we trust and obey him. I'll give you a good example. There's an organization that quote-unquote helps children, and they're just kind of a pain in the butt. If you've ever dealt with CYFD, let me just be the first one to rip off that Band-Aid. They're a pain in the butt. In fact, it kind of seems more like they're more interested in playing politics and throwing kids under the bus than it is actually helping people. But, I mean, I digress. Anyways, moral of the story being, what if you have to deal with annoying things like CYFD in order to help the hurting? Nope, I'm not going to work with those Democrats. We kind of put little lines in the sand between how far we'll go to help people. And one of the big things that we get hung up on is our own happiness. I don't want to deal with CYFD. They're a pain in the butt, so I'm not going to deal with CYFD. What about the kids? I'll go to another state. Okay, but there are still kids here. You know what I mean? You can't just throw kids away because it's a little bit inconvenient. So God brings by these opportunities for us to trust or to complain. If you remember last week, I talked about those 10 things from the book of Exodus and Numbers. And, that list of 10 things was only as far as them leaving slavery. Remember, they still complained while they were in slavery. That's more than 10 things that they complained about in slavery. God evidently wasn't counting those things. Like, for instance, they're all like, hey, God, we're slaves. Come and help us. So then he comes and helps them. He's like, hey, God, send this crazy guy Moses out of here. He's making all our lives just miserable. What do you want, Israel? What are you wanting? Everything is always an opportunity for us to trust or to complain. Everything in your life. Think about the things that upset you the most, the people that upset you the most, the situations that irritate you the most. It's an opportunity for you to trust God. That's very difficult because we want to give ourselves outs. It can't possibly be God's will to change me in this situation because this situation is annoying. Do you see the difference of opinion that us and God have? God's over here, and we're still trying to bring him over here. But God, you don't understand how annoying this situation is. Happiness is a result. It's not a destination. And the longer you search for happiness, you'll never find it. You can't chase after emotional highs and pleasure your whole life. But that's what we try to do. We go to a church because what's the factors of how we take into account what church we're going to go to? We walk in the door and how do I feel, right? And then the music plays. Am I feeling it? Did you know that the majority of people choose whether they're going to come back within the first 5 minutes of being in the service? That's before anything even happens. Nothing's happened. The music typically hasn't started by then, or if it has, haven't really gotten into it. And the pastor hasn't even preached. You have no idea what the church is about. You don't know what the church is doing for the community. It's just that first 5 minutes, returning or not returning. That's kind of a big weight. Why? Because we chase after emotional highs and pleasure. We strive for it. Why does pornography exist so great? It's not just about seeing naked bodies. It's about happiness, the pursuit of being happy. You can find anything you want online, the girl or guy, depending, of your dreams. All about emotional highs and pleasure. But living for yourself really won't work. You become obsessed with you. Well, I've been hurt. I need to watch out for me. So then you watch out for you, and that's all you do. And you become more and more bitter, more and more guarded. Life has troubles, and you can't run from it. It's just something that you have to learn how to deal with and trust God through it. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I don't even kind of know how I'm stumbling forward, but I know that God does. And I'm trying to lean on Him through the process. It's very crazy. There's a lot of bad things happening all at once. And you don't know how to navigate it. In the grand scheme of God's glory, however, our momentary suffering really isn't worth mentioning. It's a ticking clock. It won't last for forever. And Paul talks about this. I believe it's in the book of Romans. Still, many act as though they have to be unhappy. They have to be unhappy. If we look at John 10:10, it says this: "The thief comes only to steal and to kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Is that only for the next life, or is that a little bit here too? So obviously he's talking about salvation, yeah, sure, but surely that also spills out into the here and now. Surely we don't have to be miserable here, right? I mean, obviously we're going to go through struggles here. I'm not denying that. I just said that. But surely we don't have to walk around like, oh, woe is me. I've talked to many people, I'm just waiting until I die. I'm just waiting until I... Or this one was real big when I was a kid. Well, I'm just waiting on the rapture. I mean, it's okay to look forward and hope, but I mean, you don't have to walk around just like a big old sad penguin. Come on. We don't have to be miserable. But sometimes we act like to be Christian is to be unhappy. They're just caught up in the pleasures of this world. You have to be more serious like me all the time. And no football. No football. What's that, sinner? What? Was somebody watching the Indy races? See what I mean? And it becomes a thing of almost like a competition of who can have the most dreary and boring life. Because surely, we go to the other extreme. Surely God doesn't want us to experience any joy whatsoever. Well, you don't have to be miserable. You don't have to be miserable. You can learn to enjoy the things. You can even learn to enjoy the times of struggles. And then you can also learn to enjoy things that aren't related. Like, for instance, I like biking. You can learn to enjoy things. You don't have to just, I have to deal with this. You can choose to enjoy where you are, but some things are going to try and stop you. And we're going to look at those. Well, before I look at them, though, I forgot to mention this. Excuse me. As a people, we're generally not content. We're not content. I mean, if you look at it, we're not content with our ministries, our jobs, our houses, our cars, our belongings, our spouse, our kids, our lack of spouses, houses, and kids, our church, our pastor, whatever it is, we're not content with where we are. If you stop and genuinely ask yourself, I don't want any answers, please. Because number one, you're either going to lie to save face, or you're going to not genuinely think about it. So don't answer. I just want you to think about this. Look at your life and ask yourself, am I content with where I am? Not am I pursuing something. You should always be pursuing, striving for a goal. That's fine. I'm talking about, are you content? Think about it. Most of us aren't content, and we don't realize that we're not content. Maybe we're not happy with our spouse. Or maybe we don't have a spouse and we're not happy. I don't know. Maybe we're not overly happy with our kids. We thought our kids were just going to be super awesome people all the time, and then they're not. Gah! So what are some of these things that are going to stop you from being, from enjoying where you are now. The first thing, ready for it? Drum roll. Envy. What is envy? Envy is the art of counting his blessings instead of yours. That was something Harold Coffin once said. I slightly changed the wording, but that was more to just help it to flow a little bit better. It's the same concept. We say things like, well, why won't God give me that? Or we say the opposite, why did God give me that? Why did he give me this burden? Why did that have to happen to me? Why won't God give me that? How about instead be thankful for what God gave you? Be thankful for just wherever you are. How can I possibly be thankful with these struggles? Find a way. The person who dies with the most toys still dies. No matter how much stuff you get, it won't make you happy. If you are able to remove all of your troubles and struggles and everybody that annoys you, you still won't be happy. Absence of trouble won't make you happy. If you were to sit around and do absolutely nothing for one single week, try it. Go home, cancel all your schedules, sit and do absolutely nothing, and sit down on your couch for an entire week. Tell you one thing, you will not be happy. In fact, your life satisfaction will drop. Why? Because we as people were made for resistance. Take, for instance, our heart. Our heart is a lot healthier when we exercise than when we just sit around. Our heart wasn't meant to be idle. Our body was made for tension. Is it so much to assume then that our spirit was too? Think about it. Maybe what we're looking for isn't the absence of conflict. Maybe what we're looking for is something that sticks with us through conflict. And that is altogether different. So if you were to get all these things, it really wouldn't make you happy. Let's look at Proverbs 24, 1 through 2, because sometimes what we do is we struggle and we look at someone else and we say, why them, God? They're not even, I'm better than them. Do not envy the wicked, do not desire their company, for their hearts plot violence and their lips talk about making trouble. See, the thing is, wealth and riches that people get in this life, that wicked people get, and they take advantage of people, and you know, they climb to the top by shoving everybody out of the way, that kind of wealth doesn't last. It comes with sorrow. You stay up all night worrying about it. You worry about losing it. You think about all the faces of people that you hurt. That kind of stuff doesn't make you happy. So then we say something along the lines of this. They don't have struggles like me. Here's the thing. They are not your concern. You worry about you. I remember there's this one story in the Gospel of John where Peter's trying to figure out, you know, Jesus just tells him, hey, so Peter, this is going to happen to you. And he says, well, what about John? What are you going to do about him? And Jesus basically says, what does that matter to you? Go mind your own business. Well, what? Is there a problem here? And the same thing happened today with my kids. One of my kids was doing something, and the other one comes up and, oh, well, this is, I said, what does it matter to you? I see what's going on. You go worry about you. Did you do what I asked you to do? Well, no. And I said, so you haven't done what I asked you to do, and that's exactly what we do with God. I'm not going to do what God asked me to do. I'm not going to forgive. I'm not going to love. I'm not going to keep reaching out to people. But then I'm going to let God know about all these other people and what they're doing wrong. Do you know what I do when somebody tries to come to me and complain about how somebody else in the church is doing their ministry? I say I'm not interested. Or I say, oh, would you like to do it every week like they do? Oh, well, no, I don't want to do that. See, maybe I don't like how Yams is run. Maybe I don't like how food pantries run. Maybe I don't like how the women's Bible studies, but I don't want to do anything to change it. No, I'd rather just complain about how somebody else is doing it. They don't have struggles like me. Well, they have their own struggles. Accept your struggles. Instead of trying to live in denial of the problems that you have, learn to accept them and plan a way forward. It's a whole different mindset. One says, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what I got to deal with. How do I move forward? The other one says this is what I have to deal with. I can't move forward. Completely different mindset. And always remember that someone always has it worse than you. No matter what hell you have endured, someone has always had it worse than you. There was one story that I heard, and I was like, oh man, surely this is the epitome of the worst thing that could possibly have happened. It wasn't a week later I heard another story about a different kid, and they had it way worse than that kid had it. And I was like, I don't think I could possibly get any worse than this. So then I was reading another story from overseas, and that kid had it way worse than those other two kids. And I was like, how down and deep can the root of human sorrow reach? Evidently pretty far. Evidently pretty far. So a good idea in life is to focus on obeying God, not what you have. See, because we put the emphasis on the wrong thing. How can I be happy with the struggle, with this person, with the situation, with not having this, with not having that? That's not even the issue. The issue is, am I obeying God? Has nothing to do with what I'm given in the meantime. Another thing to think about is nothing in your life is permanent. Your health could change at any moment. You could lose your health at a house at any moment. Your car could break down. There could be a flood. There could be an earthquake. Anything could happen at any moment, at any given time. You could lose everything. Don't worry about that stuff. Don't worry about what you have. Do you obey God because of what you'll get? Maybe because He answers your prayer. What if He stops? Maybe because He healed someone, or you hope that He will heal someone. Maybe you obey Him because He does what you want. Maybe, well, what if He takes all that stuff away? What happens if He stops answering your prayers? What if He stops doing all those things? In survival training, one of the first things they tell you is keeping up morale. There's a lot of people who can build a shelter, find food, find potable water. These are all good skills to have, great skills to have. But if you lose morale, the whole thing is for nothing. You go a little bit crazy when you're in a survival setting. The longer you're in the survival setting, the more crazy you get. And so one of the first things they teach you in survival training is morale. You have to keep your morale up. The idea is that you don't have to last for forever. Just get through the day. That's the idea. Focus on the immediate. Don't focus on 3 weeks. What if they never find me? Don't worry about it. We're not worried about 3 weeks from now. We're worried about today. See what I mean? And that's one of the first things they teach you is morale. But in our life, we do something completely opposite. We just kind of find things to gripe and complain about instead. I'll obey God so long as He has something to offer me. Having enough in life is hard because you become unthankful. I don't know how it works, but the more you have, the more unthankful you are. You spend it on yourself. I have this money, so it's mine, and I can spend it on me. You forget to trust God. You rely on your smarts. You worry about losing what you have. That's something that just greatly confuses me. The more you have, the more you worry about losing it. You start living for yourself. You manipulate others so that you can continue to have more. Somewhere you cross a line. It's no coincidence that rich people oftentimes are manipulators. Something happens when you get wealth, and you don't handle it very well. But on the same flow, not having enough is just about as hard because you become ungrateful as well. You would think that the less you have, the happier you are. That's not always the case. Sometimes when you don't have, you become ungrateful. You stop trying because you're just bitter from it. Every day is a struggle. You get up, you work hard just to be taken advantage of, and you have nothing. So you start getting bitter. So then you reach a place to stop trying. Well, obviously the wealthy know how to solve all of the problems of the poor, and the poor know how the wealthy should solve all of their problems. But neither of the two groups know how to be content with what they have. If you have a lot of money, you always need a little bit more. If you don't have money, you really do need it. When you don't have, you think having will make you happy. And when you have, you realize that it doesn't make you happy. Another bad part about when you don't have enough is you go into survival mode. And when you get into that kind of a mode, you start taking advantage of other people because I need it more than you. It's a very hard place to be in. Contentment shifts the focus to God and sees His grace in carrying us. Discontentment is all about me. It's all about what they have, comparison. Contentment is about God, and it's about God's grace. Look at what these people have done versus look at what God has done for me. Completely different. And the thing is, this doesn't come easy. We are all naturally discontent. You have to choose to be content. Proverbs 37-9 says this, 2 things I ask of you, Lord, do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and still, and so dishonor the name of my God. So the second discontentment, and before I move on to that, I do want to say this. You have to learn your own hang-ups. You have to learn the things that you have a problem with. For instance, I have a problem with people who are doing the wrong thing getting away scot-free. That personally irritates me because my mission in life has been doing the right thing even when I lost, even when it wasn't convenient, and even when everybody looked down on me and just gossiped and complained about me anyways. Doing everything perfect and still having to reap the consequences as though I hadn't. That's been my entire life. It's very difficult to not get bitter with that, and it's even more difficult to not get bitter with that when I see other people who are doing the wrong things, and they're winning, Charlie Sheen style. That is my hang-up. Another hang-up I have is it really bothers me how some people have no problem with sleep. I've always had a problem with sleep, ever since I was a kid. I hate sleeping. It feels like a waste of time. I get really antsy when I know I have to go to sleep, and I have to fool myself into going to sleep. It bothers me about my anxiety that I have to constantly deal with something, and it irritates me even more because I know that there's going to be, Mr. or Mrs. Superman that comes along and says, I know the cure for your anxiety. And they go on their slew about how if you just do all their little things, and it's like, okay, all right. And then they go, okay, all right, well, you got through your spill, so now you'll feel better. But then they have another list of things, and they have these secret, things that they drink and eat and stuff. And if you just follow this, and then this other person comes by, well, no, that person has it wrong. If you just do this. And so it becomes very annoying for me because not only do I have to deal with it, but then I have to deal with other people trying to think that they can solve all my problems if I just do what they said. See what I mean? Those are things for me that are personal hang-ups. They are things that irritate me personally. And then there are things that get me bogged down. For instance, I have a tendency to work too hard. Some other people have a tendency to not work hard enough. You have to find out your own hang-ups. Instead of being a master of what everybody else is doing wrong, you have to master yourself. What are your hang-ups? What are the things that slow you down from pursuing God? Do you seek God less when you have more money? Then give your money away. Do you have a harder time trusting God when everything's going right? Well, then make a problem. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. That was a joke. One thing that might help you is find a hobby, Learn another language, for instance. So discontentment number 2, complaining. Oh boy. These two things will cause you unbelievable discontentment if you're doing either of them. It doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. If you're doing either of these two things, you will not be content. Complaining. So let's look at a few ideas of what it is. First off, happiness comes easier when you stop complaining about your problems and you start being grateful for the problems you don't have. See, that kind of a creative solution you can't find when you're in a mindset of complaining. Someone else is happy with less than you have. See, when I get in my little moods of feeling sorry for myself, I'm oftentimes reminded how there are a lot of people who have it a lot worse than me. And I encourage you to do the exact same thing. When you're in your little pity party about how nobody understands you, how everybody takes advantage of you, everybody hurts you, all this different stuff, stop and realize how many other people have it so much worse than you. Or you could think of, for instance, Jesus, who his entire life was focused on dying. He came for the sole reason of dying. Did you make it past 30? Hey, you're doing better than he did. Are you living under the shadow of what you have to endure in the future, being mistreated, dying for the sake of everybody else, and being perfect the whole time? Yeah? No, you don't? Okay, all right. So there are people who have it worse than you. Okay, all right. I'm glad we were able to nip that in the bud. 1 Corinthians 10:10-13 says, "And do not grumble as some of them did," and talking about Israel, "and were killed by the destroying angel." We looked at that story, I think it was last week. "These things happened to them as examples and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the culmination of the ages has come. So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to man." So I do want to mention something. I'll say it in just a second. "And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear." He did not say that God will not give you more than you can handle. He did not say that. God will give you more than you can handle, so that you'll turn to him. Myself, Chuck, and Randy, and Pastor Randy have all three talked about this. So I hope that you're getting that. He's talking about temptation. He very clearly said, tempted. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. The takeaway here being, you don't have to be bitter. You don't have to do what's wrong. You don't have to sin. Well, the situation is too hard. The person is too annoying. Nobody listens to me. They're doing it wrong. They're taking advantage of me. They really hurt me. Find the good instead of finding all the bad. Well, nobody ever encourages me. You take the time to go encourage people. Instead of finding what everybody else is doing wrong and how they treat you, find a way to encourage them. Well, I'll encourage the people I like. Well, what about these people? We're not going to talk about those people. But, these people are really hurting. And I said, we're not talking about those people. Do you see how we kind of play favorites there? We are masters of if. If, it's such a simple word, but it causes us so much problems. We are masters of it. I'll obey God if he acts how I think is fair. I'd be happy if this would happen, or if that person wasn't in my life. If. What if we didn't have to wait? What if we're holding ourselves back with our own crappy attitudes? Contentment accepts the situation and trusts God's goodness. Complaining doesn't do that, and that's why we end up discontent, because we live in denial of the situation. This isn't going to happen, or God's going to bail me out, or somehow this isn't going to be, we try to find some way to run from it or get bitter about it or whatever. We go through the 5 stages of grief about it. We get angry about it. We try to make a deal with God. But contentment accepts the situation. And instead of complaining, finding all the bad in everybody and myself and everything, contentment trusts God's goodness. There's other things I could have mentioned about, things that cause discontentment, is when you're living in sin, when you're self-focused, when you're addicted to entertainment, like looking at porn. You just kind of get dissatisfied with life. There's lots of other things that I could have said, but these two, I think, are the two that are most important to focus on tonight: envy and complaining. So, okay, if those are two things that will keep you from being satisfied in life, let's look at a solution, and that's from Philippians chapter 12, verse 13. Chapter 4, verse 12 through 13. "I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want." Are you going to tell us, Paul? "I can do all this through him who gives me strength." I can get through it because I know who holds it. The secret, God is with you. When you have much, it's a gift from God. When you have little, still from God. Can you find a way to trust him in it? Can you find that he can give you strength to deal with it? Can you find that he will guide you forward? So what does it mean to be content? Well, contentment, a dictionary definition would be satisfaction or peaceful happiness. But something more important than its strict definition is the idea that contentment is a choice that you make. Contentment is a choice that you have to make. Well, I made that choice. Did you make it today? It's a daily choice. It's something you don't just move on from. Contentment is a place that you have to be in your heart that you keep coming back to. God, you're more than enough for me today. No matter what I gain, no matter what I lose, you're more than enough for me today. Contentment is a very big issue because our whole life is focused on happiness instead of being content in Christ. Some try to be happy by seeking pleasure, things like sex and money and entertainment, but these things never satisfy for very long. They're nothing but just distractions. Still, we keep striving after them. When I was a kid, oh God, don't let the rapture come yet. Let me get married first. Were you ever a kid that prayed something like that? If this would just happen, then I can go to the grave in peace. So we get to the point to say something like this: bad things just keep happening. Everybody is against me. Well, that more reveals your outlook. There will be people against you. There will be things that go wrong, but that doesn't mean everybody. And that doesn't mean that everything is wrong. Saying things like that reveals your outlook. Doesn't really reveal much of the problem. Storms are going to come, and there will also be times of calm that come. There will be storms in your life. There will be times of calm in your life. The problem is that sometimes a storm rattles us so bad that when the calm hits, we spend all the time worrying about the next storm. We're waiting for the boot to drop, right? We can't be happy because we're like, oh no, if I get too happy, God's just going to take it away again. And so we find ourselves in this constant place of tension that I really don't think God intended for us to be in. But storms are going to come, and times of calm will come. What you have to do is that when the times of calm come, seize the opportunity. Rest, seek after God, strengthen your walk with God. Do things that loosen you up. Stop worrying about what's going to happen next. Because we do that. And so what happens when the storm comes? When the storm comes, realize that you can't operate the same way in the storm that you do out of the storm. As a pastor, when there's a conflict in the church, you spend a lot more time praying. When there's not, you spend a lot more time preparing for different ministries, for different things out in the community. You take advantage of what you have, right? You don't plant seed all the year round, right? That just doesn't make sense. There's a time for planting, a time for growing. And so what has to happen is that you seize the opportunities of calm and you rest in the times of storm. But remember that life is more than struggles, and you have to let the past go. You have to let it go. Maybe somebody died, and you just keep holding on to it. You got to let it go. Maybe somebody hurt you, and you just keep holding on to it. You got to let it go. It's easier said than done, but it's something that everybody has to deal with. Everybody has to deal with their own demons. See, the whole outlook here is wrong. Don't try to be happy. Don't worry about being happy. Let God teach you to be content, whether situations, people, loss, or abundance. Your focus isn't on being happy. It's learning to be content in Christ. And I will say this, you will have to learn different skills for the times of plenty than the times of need. When you're in a place in your life of just great struggles, you have to learn different skills when everything's going fine. You need a completely different skill set. So how does this apply? Well, we are often not happy because we are at war with our hearts. In here isn't calm and at peace. And so we're not happy. We go through religious motions, and our focus kind of gets off, and we become very unthankful. And so what we try and do is we try and compensate for the problems around us by fixing everything on the outside, right? We focus on the outside to fix the hurt, to fix the heart. We do something like this. If I land the right job, if I get the right relationship, if I do this, we go through the different external things. We try to change everything on the outside. If I move, if I get a new house, that'll make me happy. Well, my wife's the problem. She's the reason why I'm not happy. I'll divorce her. I'll find another wife. We have all these different things as reasons and excuses why we're not happy. And we try and change everything on the outside to change what's going on in here. But I have a little bit of bad news. If our heart is at peace with, good news. Let me say that differently. I have some bad news. If your heart is at war, you will not be at peace. Because it's not about the absence of problems in your life or the absence of people in your life. It's about where your heart's at. So now I have good news, now that I've said it the right way now. If our heart is at peace with God, the rest of us can follow. See, we try to make everything about the external. Are you getting this? We make it about our jobs, our ministry, our doing everything right, our kids, our spouse. You fill in the blank, everything about the external, when all the time we need to get our heart in order. We try and treat a skin wound when we need a heart transplant. You see the difference there? And you will never be happy if you're focusing on the external instead of fixing the problem of the heart. But if we are at peace in here, then the situations that it's like this. Don't let the storm get in your heart. That's another way of saying it. Whatever the situation, God can walk you through it. He can. So the idea here that I want you to get is contentment. Not external pleasures, internal contentment with God. And it'll get you through anything. You don't need the situation to change. You don't need everybody who annoys you to go away. You don't need to find a different job, a better house, a different car, a better spouse. You don't need all those things. What you need is a heart that is content. If nothing ever changes, if things only get worse, still content with God. That's what you need. You're not going to hear that on TV because they're going to tell you that you need the newest beauty products, the newest movies, the newest video games. Then you'll be happy. Like they know anything, right? Lord, I pray that you'd help us to be content as we stumble through this difficult paths that are set before us, Lord. Help us learn contentment, what that means. Lord, help us to learn what is holding us back from being content in you, that we could address it. What things are we holding on to? Lord, I pray that you'd help us to find new contentment in you, and a contentment that wouldn't change, a contentment that would be steadfast on you. And I thank you for what you're doing. I want to encourage you to just spend some time either tonight or throughout the week and just think about this.